Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Knox Slab Audio and our 5th Master Series. I do believe the 6th video in our 5th Master Series, Professional Sounding Results from Your Home Studio. And this is the 2nd video that we'll be talking about environmental concerns. In this video, we're going to talk about the subject itself a little bit, and then we're going to talk about some non-scientific solutions that can probably get done what you need to do. And in the next video, we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth and look at the room as far as recording and listening environment a little more scientifically and dealing with it a little bit more like an acoustician. And then in the video following that, we are going to talk about audio engineering processes and concepts to dealing with problems you might have and creating your own rooms the way you want just from audio engineering itself. So let's get started and take a look at the concepts a little bit so we have a little bit better understanding and we can start looking at some possible non-scientific solutions that can probably solve the problem for a lot of smaller studios or even mid-sized studios. So hang on a minute and let's start looking at the issue. Okay, so first of all, the first thing I want to say is in this video, the next video will go a little bit deeper, but we're basically looking at this between this video and the one after the next video that we basically just want to solve most major issues and then deal with considering limitations before captures and compensating for limitations after captures. So that will basically be kind of the target for this video. So the first thing we want to address is we want to reiterate there's only so much quality you're going to get in a formatted file. Unless you're dealing with super high sample rates and bit depths for audio files and audio file equipment, which is really expensive, it's really redundant and overkill, and we really have to get that in our head. The second thing we have to look at is we are not doing scientific work, so we do not need an all-out anechoic chamber to deal with our studio productions. And we don't need some $2-3 million room with acoustics done perfectly to get radio-ready productions. We just don't. We have to consider our limitations, consider things are an issue, and be able to deal with them with simple measures and being able to compensate for things with our audio engineering. That's the first logical course and point of view. In the next video, we'll get a little bit more deeper, but we really need to keep that in mind and to consider that. So in this video, we are going to talk about things like external noise issues, internal noise issues, and soundproofing. Get you started researching all about that, targeting your problem, and looking at that. And then we are going to go directly into looking an unscientific look at what really our problem is and the biggest issue we need to look at. And then we'll look at some unscientific solutions before we go into a much more in-depth point of view in the next video. So hang on a minute and let's get started looking at our soundproofing measures. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about with that is soundproofing. So basically you've got internal noise issues and external noise issues that very simply you need to find the culprit, target it, and soundproof against it. So it's a pretty simple process of targeting the culprit and then soundproofing against it. So basically, if you just Google on the internet soundproofing a room, you will almost assuredly find the culprit and a fairly inexpensive solution, if you dig around a little bit, to solve the problem and soundproof against the issue. It's not something I'm going to get into a lot, but it's very important because Internal and external noise issues will imprint on your captures and cause you issues while you're processing, editing, mixing, and mastering. So it is something you need to consider. Try not to spend a lot of money, and if it's really bad, you may want to consider moving your studio to somewhere that's a little more cost effective, that you don't have to spend so much money on soundproofing. So it's a pretty simple deal. Find the culprit and soundproof against it. So let's get on to the main focus. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at the problem a little unscientifically. So whether we're talking about we're talking about our impulse responses, our standing waves, resonance issues, modal distribution issues. Unscientifically, basically, it works out to a frequency response problem, basically an equalization problem. So it's a pretty simple concept. So basically, the reality of the issue, unscientifically, without getting too deep into it, is you've got an equalization problem. So now you can get pieces of software like REW, go through SPL readings, distortion impulses, RT60s, clarity, waterfalls, decay, understanding what all is going on there. By the time you really understand this free piece of software and understand everything it's trying to tell you, you will be borderline acoustician as far as an engineer is concerned and have a pretty good understanding of it. And it can give you a lot of information. I do not dissuade you from looking around on that. And on the internet, there's tools like this AMROC, and it's telling you this is the size of the room. It tells you the different types of modes, the frequencies in those modes, bolt areas to see where you're safe when you're not, where the issues are in 3D, what the tunings of your room issues are as far as the modes and what type of modes you're dealing with. So you can get a little bit better understanding of what's happening there. And the software will actually, this is just something on the internet, and it explains it fairly well, and some other stuff that's happening there. And we'll get into this a little bit more in the next video, but it gets a little complicated, and there's a lot of stuff going on in there that is very complex. So we're going to try to break it down into very simply. Unscientifically, you have an equalization problem in your room, and that may be different in different areas. Does that make sense? And that's what we want to kind of deal with right now, unscientifically. So let's take a look at that solution first before we become acousticians or borderline acousticians in the next video. Hold on a minute. Let's take a look at some solutions. Okay, so unscientifically, with a little bit of insight to what the deal is basically we want to try to anechoic chamber our area as much as possible. And the real simple solution to that, because we want to try to kill the room, basically. So basically the first solution is getting as much absorption panels on your wall and ceiling as much as possible. Diffusers are great. We'll talk about it in the next video, but they're a secondary solution. You want absorption panels on your wall, at least up to 75% of your wall space. Less you can get by with, but as much as you can get on the walls as possible, the better off you will be, because it doesn't give your room a chance to be able to cause problems. And the more absorption panels you have on the wall and ceiling, the less space there is that can cause those issues that we're trying to stop, which unscientifically works out to an equalization problem. Okay, so that's a very simple unscientific solution. You start slapping absorption panels all over the place as much as you can. And a secondary solution to that is like you have panels like this. You can take an area that, let's say over in the corner of your room, you can hang one of these from the ceiling. You can hang one on all four sides with a couple feet in between each one of them for a recording area, and it will probably solve all of your problem. It's very unlikely you're going to have a whole lot of residual issues from that, because it's going to absorb most of the problems. And anything escaping out of there probably is not going to be that big of an issue. And you can do the same thing around your recording area. Wherever you're listening and you're mixing and mastering and processing, you can do the same thing. You can do that with panels like that, or you can do that with large, thick Indian rugs, hang one from the ceiling and on all four sides, leave a couple of foot space to come in and out, and it more than likely going to unscientifically solve the majority of your problems. It's very unlikely that you're going to have any major issues that you have to deal with as an audio engineer. You may have a little bit of problem, but I mean, it's very unlikely you're going to have anything that you really have to deal with. By the time you actually start engineering and you start doing your equalization, reverberations, and filtering and cleaning things up to the best of your ability, by the time you get done doing good editing and good filtering and good processing, it's really unlikely anything is going to leak out of that area and cause you a problem that doesn't get dealt with in the process of editing, processing, mixing, and mastering without it being a headache. Does that make sense? And that is a very simple, unscientific solution. A very simple one that can probably solve your problems if you're a small home studio, if you're a medium semi-professional studio, or even if you're a small professional studio. You should be able to come out with radio-ready productions. If you do good audio engineering and you're a good audio engineer, you got good productions and good performances, that should not stand in your way, even that simple unscientific solution. So that's the first way we want to look at it. And in the next video, we want to dig a little bit deeper and look at it a little bit more scientifically and see how deep do you really need to go for what you're trying to do, whether you're a small home studio, a semi-professional, or a small professional studio. What do you really need to deal with? And in the next video after that, we'll talk about some audio engineering stuff that's going to be for everybody, no matter how big of a studio you're in. Being a better audio engineer saves you headaches, period. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on environmental concerns, and I will see you in the next video.